A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our case this week, a forbidden love affair in the furry community leads to revenge and the murder of 3 people after a teen girl's parents barred her from seeing her adult furry friend. The man made a plan to kill off the parents so the 2 lovers could be together. It was a terrible plan. 3 people are dead. He and his accomplice are in prison for the rest of their lives, and the girl he says he did this for wants nothing to do with him. We are recording this on Friday, April 18th, 2025. Our guest today is Rachel Fiset, an attorney, a legal analyst, a dear friend of the show. Rachel, how are you? Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to discuss our case today.
Yeah, it is definitely a very complicated one because it is about obsessions. And we see that a lot in murder cases. This man became obsessed with this teen girl. He was willing to kill for her. He met her through the world of furries, a subculture of people who enjoy dressing up in animal costumes. And they form these unique identities that they call fursonas. I love that word, fursona. Everybody should have a fursona. And the teen was introduced to the furries by her mom, who enjoyed this world, and her stepdad as well. But when the 17-year-old met a furry who was 8 years older, the parents said, no. And that was the beginning. Actually, I do believe the obsession that he had with the 17-year-old really was the beginning of the end. I don't know. What do you think, Rachel?
I think that this entire story is sad and weird and very rudimentary in some of the feelings that are being felt here. Just an obsession and I'm going to go get her. And there is a vengeance portion of this, allegedly, but it is all feels very immature, not thought out, and just basic instincts that are kind of ruling the day here.
Despite the fact that there was a plan, if you want to call that, it was a terribly thought out plan. And, he claims that part of this was to rescue the daughter from an environment in which she allegedly was being abused. She's 17 at the time. If she wanted to walk out the door with this new boyfriend of hers, she could have done that.
And that is what she claims was her plan, was that she was simply going to walk out the door with him, but not before letting him in to commit a murder. So I think it's a bit confusing as how the stories go, but yes, she's basically a woman at this point.
Yeah, I just almost, and there were so many alternatives is what I'm trying to say here. 3 people didn't need to be killed, and 2 little girls who were at home at the time sleeping when the murders occurred didn't need to wake up to find their mom and their dad and their family friend dead. None of that needed to happen in order for everyone to live happily ever after in this case. That is what is so tragic about this case. This is out of Fullerton, California. Here are the people involved. Frank Felix, who is now 33 years old, has been sentenced to 3 life sentences for the murders of 3 people. He was convicted of killing the parents of Katlynn Goodwin. The victims are her mother, Jennifer Goodwin Yost, who was just 39, had her whole life ahead of her, a young mom. The teen's stepfather, 35-year-old Christopher Yost. Also murdered was a family friend who had the misfortune of visiting and staying over that night, was sleeping on the couch, and this poor man was shot while he was sleeping, had no idea what was going on. His name is Arthur Billy Boucher, and he was 28 years old. Now, Frank, the boyfriend in this case, did not act alone. He enlisted the help of his buddy and fellow furry, Joshua Acosta, who is now 29 years old, and he too will be spending the rest of his life in prison. So the two men in this case met the Goodwin family at a furry event. That is kind of how this whole thing starts. So Katlyn's parents are described as creative and alternative people. Christopher worked at a trophy designing business. Mom worked from home designing jewelry and crafts. And she described herself as a carefree spirit with a lot of love to give. So here's the thing. It really depends on who you believe, because there seem to be three versions of everything that happened. And we're going to walk everybody through this. But at the center of this are two issues. One, was Katlynn being sexually abused by her stepfather, as she claimed? Was this truly a rescue operation that went wrong, or was this a planned out murder? What do you think on that one?
I think that all three people may have thought that it was something else. And Katlynn certainly maintains that she had no idea there would be murders in the home, but she did see a gun on her way out. She wasn't in the home at the time of the murder, but she did see a gun on her way out. And I think that when we call it planned, it's very loosely planned. Maybe there was a plan to get her out, but two people were shot in their sleep. So this wasn't self-defense. This wasn't a plan that went wrong. This was deliberate upon entering the home. So that was certainly someone's plan. The murder was someone's plan, likely Frank's, but that is where all these stories are differing. But two, Billy sleeping on the couch so that he could see his child the next day. He had a nearby visitation, so he routinely slept on their couch just for convenience on those days. And then her mom was shot in her sleep, and then Christopher woke up and I think was on his way to running out the door. But it wasn't like something went wrong with a plan. You have two sleeping victims.
Yeah, especially since Katlynn was able to exit the house while she waited until they were asleep. She let Joshua into the house, supposedly to use the bathroom, and then she went into the truck and sat with her boyfriend. So think about it. She had packed a bag. She could have left with Frank at that point, and everything would have been quite different. I'm not saying it would have been easy. I'm not saying that her parents wouldn't have called the police, but there's a very different situation when the police come knocking because they're trying to figure out what's going on with a 17-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. And when they come knocking because they think you're involved in a triple homicide.
I agree. I agree. And if the plan was really just as a rescue mission and to walk out the door, well, she walked out the door. They were asleep. You don't need a third person to assist with that. So I think there was more to it than what Katlynn is saying.
Yeah, it's definitely, it is hard. There are three versions of what happened, and it's hard to know exactly what the truth is. There are some consistencies in everyone's story. So let's get back to how everyone met and how things escalated, and then we'll take everyone to the day of the murder. So because Mom Jennifer was involved in the furry community, she introduced her daughter to it. And so, as we've discussed, furries have some parallels perhaps with, cosplayers, only in the sense that they dress up and role play. Very different. These characters and what, they dress in can be very elaborate. Furry community online. There are meetups. There are conventions. One side note. My experience in the furry world. As I was researching this, I kept having a recall to this time when I was working, as many of you know, on the Scamanda investigation. This is Amanda Riley, who was faking cancer to raise money. It became a hit podcast, a Hulu series. And as many of you know, I worked with Nancy Moscatello on that investigation. So I'm in San Jose, working on the Scamanda case with Nancy. And the hotel we're staying at, there are a bunch of people walking by in furry costumes. Mind you, I'm in my own world because I have to focus on what's going on. There's a big bust, there's a lot going on with the Scamanda case. And then Nancy says to me, well, they're furries. I said, well, yes, I see that they're dressed in. And she's like, no, it's a whole thing. I'm like, oh, what a fascinating time to be at a hotel during a furry convention. That's all I need to say.
That is so fascinating, so interesting. And I did some online Googling of what a brony is as to the My Little Pony furry, as each of these folks had their own identity. And it is a rabbit hole one can go down for quite some time.
Yeah. I mean, even at breakfast the next day, where I decided to walk down to a cafe instead of have breakfast in the hotel, there were plenty of furries outside in full costume, at the cafe, walking down the street. It wasn't just like, in the hallway and in the elevators. It was very interesting.
So you're entering into a bit of another world, a fantastical world, when you really do think about this case. Yeah, fantasy
and enjoying, pulling yourself out of your world and going into another, escaping, that part of it, I can totally get. It is, a hobby, an alternative life. But one thing we do want to be clear and to be respectful here of everyone's individual choices. While some people in the furry community have sexual fetishes that they're acting out, for many, this is a hobby. This is fun. This is role playing. And in fact, some furry groups are very strict that if you try to sexualize your character or your interaction with others, they will kick you out for crossing the line. So we want to be clear there. We have no idea what was going on here. But for example, Katlynn had adopted the persona of daydreamer. So she always liked to be that person. So they all meet at one of these events, and she meets Frank and Joshua are there together, as friends. And at that time, they were 25 and 21. Everybody gets friendly. And then the two men are even invited over to the house. And at some point, Frank becomes obsessed with Katlynn. And that's when the family's opinion of these two changed. They were okay just as friends, but then it really crossed the line. They felt that he was 8 years older and not appropriate for their daughter, that none of this, for them, it was a much more innocent play than it was about a sexual relationship. So here's what's interesting. The mother had shared with friends, and this has all been reported, that there was an incident at a furry get-together. That's when she finally said, that's it. We're done with Frank and Joshua. You can never see them again. And apparently what happened, according to the story, is that Frank saw Katlynn flirting with an age-appropriate furry, another teen, and he became outraged and jealous, and then in public self-harmed himself, which is very traumatic for everyone, including Katlynn. And that's when the mother said, that's it. Absolutely not. There's something not right here, and this is too dangerous. We want you out of this relationship.
Completely reasonable. That's what a mother would do. Even one that had placed her daughter in this community with adults. I think this is a completely reasonable reaction. And as the court documents show, Frank's attorneys are also arguing at multiple points that he has pretty severe mental health issues.
And the defense team for Joshua said that he had autism and that he was duped into committing the killings. Because when you think about it, Frank is the one who was obsessed and in love with her and in the relationship. So why would Joshua commit the actual killing? Because according to all accounts, Frank was outside in his truck with Katlynn, and Joshua went inside and shot everyone. So why would he do that? Like, what? It doesn't make sense.
I think the argument is that he was under Frank's control, and it obviously did not work. He was sentenced severely, but that is the argument. They're part of this community. I think there probably is this vengeance theory behind it and what Joshua in particular was doing. But also, I think that the defense is arguing he's really carrying out Frank's wishes.
Mm-hmm. And if the two really believed that she was being abused for as long as she claimed that she had by the stepfather, that maybe they had this sense of rescuing their damsel, one in a relationship, the other one friend, and trying to do the right thing. However, trying to do the right thing is not killing somebody else. That is where the disconnect is for me in this case. But we see this a lot. Like, none of these things make sense to us. I always say about why I find true crime reporting and investigating so fascinating is you ask yourself, if you were in this position and you were trying to, let's say, help someone, is this the plan you would come up with? No. And I always wonder, I wish that I could be a fly in the wall at the moment that the concept is solidified in someone's brain and they're like, yep, this is what we're doing. And they have so many opportunities to press stop, and they don't. They just go forward and double down.
And this crime in particular strikes me as immature, for lack of a better word, an undeveloped crime from perhaps undeveloped, fully developed or stunted minds, just in the way that this is carried out and haphazardly, and also so brutal.
Oh, vicious, very vicious. So the question is, was this a rescue? Was this a planned murder? We just really don't know the answer here. It's all about who you believe. You know how you see those posts all over social media that if you didn't stop to get that coffee every day going into work, by the end of the year, you would have saved, I don't know, $1,000, $2,000, unless, of course, you do 6 shots in your coffee beverage. Anyway, that really got me thinking about how just a little bit of money saved every day can really result in huge savings. And that brings us to today's sponsor, Acorns. April is Financial Literacy Month. That's right. They made a whole month reminding you to finally take control of your money. Good news is you don't need 30 days. Acorns makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that matches you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money that you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change, like from the coffee. I know investing can be confusing at times. There's no one way to do it, and there's no rule book that you must follow. That's one of the reasons I like Acorns. It makes investing simple. Sign up now and join the over 14 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $25 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/truecrime or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid non-client endorsement compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/truecrime. So the deadly plot unfolded very early in the morning hours of September 24th of 2016. Mom and dad and their friend were killed while 2 children slept in the house. This is a horror that those 2 little girls can never unsee. And that's the part. The loss of 3 lives is horrific. But then bringing these little girls into the middle of this, what were you thinking? They're the ones who called 911. Oh my goodness, goodness, goodness. They were shot. I don't know how the little girls didn't wake up. That's the other thing. I don't know how they didn't wake up. Police arrived at the scene after the 6-year-old called 911 at 8:20 a.m. to report the deaths of the parents. Mommy is dead in the bed. Daddy is dead in the backyard. And Billy's dead too.
So they've now been all over the house looking for some sort of explanation, and then had the wherewithal to call 911. Really, that's the right thing to do. But to have gone into the backyard, gone downstairs, Billy was downstairs, and the upstairs bedroom is where they found the mother. So that little girl had really done a horrible, horrible search for her family.
And by the time that the police arrived, the two girls, the 6-year-old and the 9-year-old, were standing on the porch outside waiting. It must have seemed like forever for those two kids. My God, 6 years old to call 911. All right. So now we're going to try to figure out what exactly happened. This is going to be based on court testimony and a lot of the reporting of the Orange County Register. Frank admitted that he gave Joshua his father's shotgun, get this one, even gave him earplugs as to not hurt his delicate ears while firing the shotgun. Let me get this straight. You're willing to kill 3 people, but you're worried about the risk to your ears?
Again, I think we have undeveloped, immature murderers. And I also think Joshua had some military background as well.
Yes. He was a mechanic in the Army and was stationed at one of the Army bases in California.
So he may have known to ask about covering his ears. Like, this is a real hazard when shooting.
Yes, but then it also makes you think, well, hold on a second. If it's just a rescue plan, you don't need the shotgun unless you're using it to make sure to hold them back so you can get the girl out. But then you definitely don't need the earplugs.
Yes. This is the planned, we're in the planned portion of the evidence.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's happening here. Now, according to the Orange County District Attorney, Katlynn waited until everyone was asleep and then joined her boyfriend, Frank, outside in his truck. And they sat there while Joshua did the dirty work. So Joshua is the one who pulled the trigger while the other two sat outside. Joshua entered the home, and that's where he found everyone. Now, what's interesting to me is after the murders, the trio, they split up. Okay. And this is where I want to put another pause into this, because if, again, the whole thing was to rescue her from an abusive relationship, they could have just stepped on the gas and gotten the girl out of there. It's another opportunity missed to think and say, no, do not kill anyone. You cannot take anyone's life here.
Well, again, as she's coming out of the house, Joshua's going into the house. She let him in, and she admits she saw his shotgun.
Right.
On her way out. So it wasn't like a rescue. It was a walk out the door.
Makes zero sense to me. Makes zero sense. But she said he needed to use the restroom in the house. Now, the other thing is, she told police later, and her stories have changed a few times, which is what defense attorneys went after, because she ended up getting immunity for testifying against these two. And that is the deal that she struck. So she has not been charged with anything here. But she has testified that she felt intimidated when she saw the weapon, and she felt that she was under duress.
And she let him in.
She let him in.
In not a dire circumstance. Going to the restroom is not a dire circumstance when what everybody is claiming, the stakes are very high, even if it's just a rescue. I do think prosecutors took pity on her in some way. I mean, I think her story through the investigation was somewhat inconsistent, and her testimony did change. And I do think because of her age and perhaps what was going on at home, we don't know for sure, but based on what was going on at home, I do think the prosecutors, in order to just firmly convict the two that appeared to be responsible for the killing, I think they took pity on her and needed her testimony and let her free, basically.
It's possible that she did not know they were planning to kill her parents. It's possible. It is possible. We don't know. I just feel like there's a lot here that doesn't make sense. And I always feel when you hear the truth, it makes sense. And some stuff's missing for me. Okay. So everybody goes a different way. Joshua goes on his own. And then Frank and Katlynn go together. They go to his parents' house. They, according to police, destroy evidence. They wash their clothes and they burn their clothes. That's how far they go. They burn their clothes. And the killers had kind of floated a theory there that maybe the murders were really a robbery gone wrong and that it would have absolutely nothing to do with any of them. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting cover up. Now, from the police perspective, this part I honestly do get. They get on scene. You have 3 people who are dead. You have 2 little girls who have survived this massacre. And you have a 17-year-old who is missing. And the little girls can say, our sister is missing. So police put out an alert and they ask for the public's help to find her because they think it's possible she may have been abducted. Mm-hmm. Right? All of this makes
all of that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So it's because of all of those things that, I mean, they're literally all captured the next day. It's not like it took police forever. This whole running away plan was never even put into place. They never got anywhere.
Half-baked, undeveloped plan. She certainly knew of it at the time. They're burning their clothes. They're destroying evidence. They're creating something in their minds that looked like a robbery scene. So it's a pretty shoddy cover-up, and the police were on it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Katlynn claims she didn't even know that her parents were dead until the police told her. I suppose that's possible. If she was not in the house, does that mean she wouldn't have heard the shotguns? I don't know.
It seems in the realm of possibility, but the cover-up suggests otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So both Joshua and Frank were charged with the killings. And of course, as we've said, Katlynn was not. She was the one who would testify against them. At Joshua's trial, now she's only 19 at this point, 17 when the murders occurred, 19 for the first trial. She takes the stand and she offers her version of events. That's when she says that Katlynn had been abused by her stepfather and had been, this is what she claims, had been molested on a weekly basis from the ages of 7 to 15. Katlynn told the jury that she told Frank about the abuse because she felt safe with him and that she had asked the 2 men to help her run away. But she also said, here's the other part that's perplexing. She says at another point that when she confided in Frank about the alleged abuse, that he blackmailed her and said, if you don't have sex with me, I'm going to tell your mother and I'm going to tell everyone about what's been going on with your dad.
That does not make a lot of sense to me because, again, she's letting him or his associate into the home, again, with a shotgun. She's voluntarily getting into that car. That part feels a bit off. I believe there might have been some element of obviously a sexual relationship and maybe some coercion. But that exact testimony doesn't resonate as completely true to me.
I think there was so much going on here. And especially if Frank was not very stable. I mean, upset that she's flirting with someone her own age and causing in public a scene. There's a lot here. I mean, you could see him if she rebuffed him, if she trusted him and then she rebuffed his advances because she saw him more as a friend and an ally. And then he's like, well, if you don't, I'm telling. I could see where she would feel like, oh my God, my secret's about to come out before I'm ready for anyone to know about this. So I think there's a mixture. my personal opinion is there are little bits of truth. I just don't know in what order and which one really. I think there are little bits of everything in this one. So here's the other thing she says on the stand. She says the night of the murders that she had planned to tell her mother about the alleged sexual abuse before leaving with her two princes that were going to rescue her. Just kind of interesting. And she said that she had packed her belongings and then she texted Joshua, not Frank, Joshua, after her parents had fallen asleep with a plus sign that they had already prearranged would be the signal via text that it was go time.
That part makes more sense to me. This part where she was going to have her final moment before she leaves her home and probably in her mind is running away forever, making her family very upset, and she's giving them a reason. That part resonates. That seems like the kernels of truth feel more congealed there. And I think in her mind, maybe that is what she wanted to do. She wanted to have the moment that she stood up for herself and let her mother know what she believed was going on in the home.
But my feeling is, if she had told her mother what was going on, I can't imagine everyone just would have gone to bed.
No,
that seems like they'd be up all night dealing with this.
I think what she was planning was perhaps a dramatic leave. And then that's where the shotgun comes in. And that's where everybody is primed for a rescue. If they know they're primed, because you're right, I believe they'd be up all night too. And then, maybe she didn't think her mom would believe her, or things would be violent, or her stepfather would do something terrible to her. So I get that part of it, and in conjunction with the rescue. But again, it didn't play out like that. It seems like that never happened. Everybody went to bed as normal, and she walked out the door.
Yeah. So Joshua's defense attorney said that Katlynn was lying and was trying to poke holes in a lot of her testimony. Understandable, because she is the primary witness here. So the defense got her to admit that she had lied several times to the police, that she had, there were inconsistencies in her story. Because at one point she changed her story and said that it was her mother who was abusing her. And then she took that back and said, no, it was the stepfather. So I don't know. What do you as an attorney make of that?
Well, this is where I think giving her immunity, and perhaps the prosecutors actually really kind of feeling for her, and perhaps some mental health issues. The allegation is that she was abused at least once a week by Christopher between the ages of 7 and 15. And if that was truly going on in the home, if she is a sexual abuse survivor throughout that time, I think the inconsistencies do make sense. And there is some sort of blame placed on her mother, even if her mother isn't the abuser. So if your mother is there to protect you, she's not doing her job. You're being abused by her husband. That's a whole lot of layers. And so I think prosecutors perhaps were giving her the benefit of the doubt, even though there was likely a fair amount of untruthfulness throughout the investigation, maybe even at the trial, but giving her that leeway if indeed she was a sexual abuse survivor from such a young age.
Yeah, and if she was, it absolutely makes sense that maybe she wasn't thinking clearly as to how to get out of her situation, because when an adult is doing this in the household to a child, you feel like you have no way out, and it's very extreme. It's you just want it to stop, and you want to get away. So I could see where maybe it wasn't fully thought out, and maybe she truly did not expect that this is how it would end. She just wanted to get away from there, and whatever these two had figured out, they were helping her exit. So I do understand. I do agree with you there, Rachel, that that does seem consistent with her age and then the allegations, and if she is a survivor of such horrific abuse. How can you possibly think straight?
That's my thinking on that. It is, and there is a blame to her mother. It's if she believes her mother was idly sitting by and possibly had an awareness of this, in her mind, it's, she can justify blaming her mother, even if it wasn't the abuse coming directly from her.
Yeah. So here's some more inconsistencies and then also some troubling text messages. And y'all, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this because, we all sometimes say things in a dire way, but we don't necessarily mean it. However, when placed in the context of a triple homicide, it takes on new meaning. Okay, so police uncovered these text messages that Katlynn, sent to a friend before the murders complaining about her mother. Katlynn texted a friend, quote, "Ever looked at someone and wondered how many ways can I kill them right now?" And then she added, "I have."
So this is context, right? So this is all context. Is this a teenage girl angry at her mother? I have a teenage girl. I'm hoping these texts aren't sent, but tensions can get high. Or is this a true plan being thought of and made at this point? And these are the kinds of texts that are really put in context in various cases. And in hindsight, it certainly looks like a plan in place and how she actually felt. But in a totally different context, it's run of the mill.
Yeah. Now, she explained to the jury what those text messages meant. Her explanation was, okay, sure, they are disturbing, but they were written under her persona. So it wasn't her, it was her persona. And if at any point this young woman dealing with a difficult and frightening situation at home, if she escaped through her personas, she may have truly disconnected from one part of herself. It kind of makes sense. I'm upset by the text message. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, the text message is certainly disturbing. Again, in the context, it's elevated. And really, if you think of what could have been going on in this house, the fantastical way that both her mother and her may have been dealing with life maybe even makes more sense. Was this a persona? Was this her? Was she confused as to who is who at any given time? If she really was suffering traumatic abuse from the age of 7, again, we're in a zone of mental health consequences that are not so unusual.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a jury convicted Joshua on November 8th of 2018 on 3 counts of murder and sentencing enhancements for these multiple murders and the discharge of a firearm causing death. And on December 14th of 2018, Joshua was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole plus 75 years. So the two men's trials were separated, but they both met similar ends. 6 years later is when Frank finally goes on trial, and that would be November 12th of 2024. Frank is finally convicted of 3 counts of felony first-degree murder with special circumstances of lying in wait. And then earlier this month, on April 11th, Frank was given 3 life sentences for the murders without the possibility of parole. I find that interesting. It feels like it's harsher on Frank, even though Joshua is the one who pulled the trigger.
I think you have a closer tie to motive and putting the plan in place to Frank. And as Joshua would tell it, and as it may have come out through to the jury, Joshua was more of the lackey, and he was just doing what he was told and motivated less by, say, an obsession with a young girl, and more as a vengeance and through his friendship with Frank. So they certainly thought Frank was the mastermind here.
Yeah, clearly. A family member of the victims told the court that no sentence can erase the horrors of that night. Frank himself made a statement. He called himself a beast, an interesting choice of words, and that he offered to trade places with those who he killed. Is that an apology?
I think that speaks to his mental health. I think his defense attorney said he was suicidal and self-harmed. And I think that just speaks loudly to where his mental state is.
Now, the two surviving daughters, the children who woke up to this madness, they have been placed with their dad's cousin, and that's how they are being raised. I wonder, I don't know, if they have a relationship with Katlynn. My guess is that's fairly complicated.
My guess is that's very complicated.
Yeah. And they're going to need a lot of help and a lot of support, because you have to realize from their perspective, and they are the tiniest of the victims here, they've lost their mother, their father. They're not sure about their sister. And they may have even known Frank and Joshua if they had gone to the house. So now they're even more confused. And their children. So if these men came over in animal costumes into the house and they're just little kids, and then you add the terror of murder and then the carnage they found, furry little animals mean something different to little kids. So I just cannot imagine how everything is just twisted in their little brains.
Oh, yeah. And now they're, 9 years older. And I am sure those images are just as if they happened yesterday.
Yeah. Just such a tragic, tragic story. I mean, we always say, what would justice look like? And it's, it never feels right.
There's no answer here.
No, there isn't. I want to thank you so much. I want to let everyone know that Will is not here with us today for comments, but we always do welcome your comments. I can't wait to hear what you think about this case, what you think about who knew what, and what you think was the real plan. We have that conversation on YouTube, but of course, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube. We're kind of everywhere. Rachel, where can people find you?
You can find me on my firm website at zfzlaw.com or on Instagram at Law and Rachel.
Excellent. All right. You can find me at Ana G News. Rachel, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to see you. All right, everyone. This is True Crime News, the podcast. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Until next week, we'll see you then.